Hi everyone, and welcome to another day here in Bronie's World. We are on the Gold Coast with all these amazing people here for a convention, and wherever Sean's gone over there, all the way from the US. Okay, and this is the Gold Coast, New South Queensland.
Thank you. Whoops.
Wow. I'm a New South Welshman, guys. Anyway, we have the amazing Ben Fuchs with us today. Sorry, Ben, who's in Colorado, Denver, Colorado. And today we're going to, I've asked Ben to speak on, because heart health disease is one of the biggest killers here in Australia. And it doesn't matter what age. I'm going to tell you a little story. One of my cousins' baby that was still 11 weeks off due to be born, they actually had to bring it early because of heart issues. So guys, this issue is not just for older folk. So Ben, with no further ado, I'm handing it over to you.
Well, you're right. You know, heart disease is the #1 killer around the world. In the United States, it's the #1 killer. In Australia, in most of the Western countries, it's the #1 killer. There's a lot of reasons for that. But most importantly, the heart is doing more work than any other part of the body. I was going to say with the exception of the brain, but probably even more than the brain. Your heart beats 100,000 times a day. Can you imagine this? How much? That's billions of times in a lifetime. So this is an amazing muscle, and it's really bizarre that that almost everybody doesn't have a problem with their heart because of how much work the heart does, and the fact that heart disease only affects a certain amount of folks is really a testimony to how amazing the human body is. So 100,000 times a day, it's pumping 2,000 gallons of blood a day. Can you imagine this? This is an organ that weighs maybe half a pound or so. It's about as big as your fist. And this thing is pumping out, if you live to be 100, it pumps out 100,000 times a day till you're 100 years old. It's pumping the blood through 60,000 miles. 60,000 miles of blood vessels. Can you imagine this? Just the phenomenal nature of what our body does. The phenomenal nature of what our body does is exemplified by this amazing organ called the heart. So first of all, real quickly, I'll bet we all know about our heart, but I bet most people don't really know what's going on there. Like the direction. You know, your heart has 4 compartments. It has an atria, left atrium, a left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle. And you've all heard the terms ventricular tachycardia and atrial fibrillation. Atrial fibrillation seems to be a real big problem these days. Basically, what happens is the heart is pumping blood throughout the body. The blood that comes back to the heart from the body. Hang on, just a quick second. That comes back into the heart from the body does not have oxygen in it, and then it goes into the lungs from the heart. So there's a lot of places where the heart has to move, and this is really important to understand in order to get a picture of what heart disease really is. So if you look at your heart, like you're facing a heart, or your friend's heart, say your friend's chest, you got a right side and you got a left side. The right side is where the blood comes in from the body. The left side is where the blood goes out to the body, and it goes first to the lungs. So it goes into the right side, and then it goes into the left side, and then it goes out, then it goes into the lungs. It goes to the right side, and then it goes to the lungs, then it goes to the left side, and it goes into the body. The reason this is important is because there's all of these different places where things can go wrong. So you have things like mitral valve prolapse, or ventricular tachycardia, or atrial fibrillation, or pulmonary hypertension. And there's all of these various spots where things can go wrong in the heart. And if you try to correct it at the level of all the different parts, it's going to get very, very frustrating. And this is why we have all of these cardiologists, at least in the United States, I'm assuming in your side of the world too, and nobody's doing anything to help us with heart disease. Is because we're all trying to target the heart when the problem is not necessarily at the level of the heart to begin with, although it shows up at the level of the heart. The next important thing about the heart is that it's an electrical system. It has something called a pacemaker, which is a phenomenally valuable and important and miraculous complex of cells that fires off electrical energy, which goes down through the heart in a wave. And this is how the heart beats. And all of this requires a lot of things to go right. What's even more important, or as important, is that the whole heart is sitting on a framework, or a skeleton, if you will, of connective tissue. And as the connective tissue deteriorates, so does heart health. So you can see you've got oxygenation as an issue, you've got electricity as an issue, you've got all kinds of valves opening and closing as an issue, and you have a skeleton of connective tissue that the heart is sitting on that also plays a role in the health of the heart. If you try to target each one of these systems, you'll go nuts. Fortunately, you don't have to. And this is where the triangle of disease comes in. The heart exemplifies the nature of the secondary nature of disease. How when we see a health challenge, whether it's heart disease or Parkinson's disease or cancer or psoriasis or autoimmune disease, we oftentimes think that's where we got to work. Well, one of the fundamental rules of healing is where you see the problem is not where the problem begins. And I want everybody to understand that, because we all have a tendency to say, oh, I have a heart problem, I'm going to go to the cardiologist. Oh, I have a glandular problem, I'm going to go to the endocrinologist. Oh, I have a reproductive problem or female health problem, I'm going to go to the OBGYN. Oh, I have a skin problem, I'm going to go to the dermatologist. We go to specialists when our diseases are generic. They're the same, and they all involve the same basic 3 points of bodily breakdown. The triangle of disease. What is the worst health problem or the worst disease that smart people suffer from? Overthinkitis. If you like to overthink, fine. Overthink all you want, but it's not going to help you get healthy, because the body, it's in the body's nature to heal. That makes health simple. So where do we start off? When you have a heart problem, when you have heart disease, where do you start off? Do you start off with the heart? Well, if you do start off with the heart, you're going to get a beta blocker. You're going to get a calcium channel blocker. They're going to try to electrocute or cauterize some of your heart tissue with a process called an ablation. Or they may stick a little spring inside your vessel with a product called a stent. And this is how we think, because we can't work on the metabolism, which is the chemistry, so we work mechanically. Let me say that again. Because our medical strategies are not equipped to handle metabolism, which is biochemistry, it works mechanically with drugs that poison different areas of the heart. That's why they call them beta blockers or calcium channel blockers. These block electrical energy. The thinking is if we block electrical energy, the heart will calm down a little bit. And that tells you something. If I may make a quick digression, heart disease is an amped up problem, a problem of amped up energy. Rev things up. That's really the key to understanding the disease state. All diseases is that the body's revved up. Inflammation, which you all know is behind chronic degenerative disease, is a rev you up phenomena. So the heart is no different. Heart disease is caused by revving things up. The heart is revved up. So the doctor's strategy is to slow things down. How do they slow things down? With drugs. Beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, various heart medications like digoxin, which is one of the oldest medications in the entire pharmacopoeia, and it's still used because it's an effective heart poison or cardiotoxin, if you will. They'll also try to slow down the heart by cauterizing it with a process called an ablation. There's various things that the doctors do to try to calm or slow the heart down. However, if you want to take care of it metabolically, you got to figure out, why is the heart revved up? The heart is revved up first and foremost because of toxicity that gets into the bloodstream through a leaky gut. You cannot have unless you have a mechanical trauma where your heart is just injured mechanically, like it gets hit. If it's a metabolic issue, it has to involve the digestive system. Now, this is tricky because people don't want to hear about the digestive system. People don't want to hear about the foods they eat. And I'm not Mr. Food Guy, Mr. Organic Guy, Mr. Boulder, Colorado hippy dippy guy. But the fact is, you've got to address the digestive system if you're going to address other parts of the body. You cannot do it otherwise. unless you're just satisfied going and getting some kind of mechanical remedy from the doctor, whether it's an antihypertensive or cardiotoxin or a beta blocker, or channel blocker, calcium channel blocker. So if you truly want to work metabolically and naturally, not only can a doctor not do anything about it, but you don't even need to go to a doctor. First and foremost, work on digestive health. I'll tell you how you do that in a second, but first let me say, once you have a leaky gut, toxins get into the bloodstream. One of those toxins is something called LPS, lipopolysaccharide. Just remember LPS if you want to really remember it. Another toxin is called histamine. Another toxin is called aldehyde. There's also a very important toxin, which was in the news a couple years ago, called TMAO. All of these disturb the health of the blood by toxifying or poisoning the blood system. So they toxify the heart by poisoning the blood. Step number one. We'll tell you how to correct these in a moment. I just want to see how it all happens. The second, and perhaps the most critical element of the triangle of disease, or point on the triangle of disease that affects the heart, is the blood sugar system. And I'm going to say this as clearly as I can. Heart disease should be regarded as a form of diabetes or dysglycemia. And say it again. Heart disease should be regarded as a form of dysglycemia or diabetes. I say dysglycemia or diabetes because diabetes is an official diagnosis. Dysglycemia just means you got a disturbance. Dysglycemia, disturbance in blood sugar. That's different than the official diagnosis. So you don't have to be a diabetic to have dysglycemia. You can go to the doctor and he'll say, you're not a diabetic, your blood is normal, your blood sugar is normal, because he's not measuring for disturbances, he's measuring for a specific criteria or threshold. If you're beneath that threshold, you're fine according to the medical model, but your body's still beginning to break down. Sugar plays a major role in terms of the health of the heart for several reasons. Number one, sugar revs things up. Remember, we said heart disease, and all disease really is a rev you up phenomenon, a speedy phenomenon. But secondly, when blood sugar is not held in control, it elevates, it becomes higher. When we talk about blood sugar, we talk about blood sugar concentration. What the density of sugar is in the blood, how concentrated the blood is with sugar. Does that make sense? Bronie, you help me because I can't really see anybody. Okay, so it makes sense? It's blood sugar concentration. Sugar is very hot, it burns. If you ever had a sugar burn, you know it burns hot. If you're baking pastries, you're making icing and you're cooking with the sugar, you get a splash of sugar on your arm, it burns hot. Well, that same burning effect burns various parts of the body. It can burn the connective tissue, causing wrinkles. It's one of the reasons why we get wrinkles. It can also burn the connective tissue in the bones. It's one of the reasons why we get osteoporosis as we get older. And it can burn the blood vessels, particularly the lining on the inside of the blood vessels. If you think of the blood vessels, think of a garden hose. The garden hose, obviously water goes through the garden hose, but what's not so obvious is the garden hose is lined on the inside. Well, the blood vessels are the same way. The blood goes through the blood vessels. That's obvious, but what's not so obvious is the inside of the blood vessels is lined with a specific type of cell, specific type of tissue. And these cells and this tissue is very easily damaged by sugar. And as the sugar levels rise in the blood and the blood flows through the vessels, and those vessels can be throughout the body, there's 60,000 miles, as we said, of blood vessels, and there's also vessels in the heart. All of that tissue is susceptible to damage from sugar. Once that tissue becomes damaged, it releases inflammatory factors as a form of protection. Inflammation is protection. You all heard about inflammation a million times if you're involved with health or you're in longevity or you have a health challenge. Inflammation is a protective response. It's like an airbag. And just like, I don't know if you ever had an airbag go off in your car. A friend of mine just had her airbag go off and she got 2 black eyes from it. And she was lucky because people die sometimes from the airbag going off. And so the airbag saves your life, but it can also kill you. The airbag saves your life, but it can also cause some serious injuries. Likewise, inflammation. Inflammation is like an airbag. It'll save your life, but it can also cause serious injuries and ultimately can even kill you. When that sugar, when the sugar level is high in the blood and damages the insides of the lining, inflammatory factors are released into the blood as a protective mechanism. Inflammatory factors, like I say, are very important for protection, but they also make it harder for blood to go through. You with me on this? So you have inflammatory factors in the blood. These inflammatory factors are secondary to sugar in the blood, which damages the inside of the blood vessels, and that blocks oxygen and that blocks blood flow. By the way, I should have said this before, the blood delivers oxygen, the blood delivers nutrition, and the blood detoxifies. So once the blood flow is impeded because of these inflammatory factors, now the tissues are not going to get oxygen, they're not going to get nutrition, and they're not going to be cleaned. They're not going to be able to remove their toxins. Again, the blood is the deliverer of oxygen, it is a deliverer of nutrition, and it's the detoxifying fluid. Once the blood becomes unable to move through the heart or through the blood vessels, the heart and various tissues of the body will not get oxygenated, they will not get nutriated, and they will accumulate toxicity. And this is all now in a situation where you already have elevated blood sugar and damage. You can see what's starting to happen here. So the blood sugar, when it becomes elevated, damages the inside of the blood vessels. The blood vessels, that keeps the blood from flowing. That means oxygen is not going to get to the tissues. That means nutrition is not going to get to the tissues, and that means your detoxification is not going to occur as readily. The tissues will be accumulating toxins. The cells will be accumulating toxins. This is true about the entire body because the blood is delivering things to the entire body, but especially to the heart, which is the hardest working system in the body. So once you have these inflammatory factors in the blood, the heart will not get fed. The heart will not get oxygenated. The heart will not get detoxified. So now you've got the first 2 points on the triangle of disease. Actually, there's a second element to the triangle of disease, and that is the hormone that's controlling the sugar. The hormone that controls the sugar is called, Bronie? Insulin.
Is it?
Insulin, yes. So you got elevated blood sugar, damages the blood vessels. The blood vessels release their inflammatory factors. Those inflammatory factors keep blood from going through. Now your heart doesn't get nutrition, it doesn't get oxygen, it doesn't get detoxified. Not just the heart, but all the organs, but the heart is working the hardest. It's the hardest working organ in the system, so it's especially susceptible to damage and problems from malnourishment, low levels of oxygen, and toxicity. But it's worse than that, because when your blood sugar goes up, a hormone is released called insulin. Insulin is supposed to control the sugar, but over time, it doesn't really control the sugar as well. So the body starts putting more insulin. And over time, that higher amount of insulin doesn't control the sugar. So the body puts out more insulin, and on this goes until you become what's called insulin resistant. That's also known, insulin resistance is also known as diabetes or type 2 diabetes. And that, like heart disease, is an epidemic, and it's no accident that as our rates of diabetes go up, so do our rates of heart disease, because heart disease in many ways is diabetes, or at least a symptom of diabetes. So you can see how all this can start to tumble out of control here. Insulin is great for pulling sugar out of the blood. Insulin does a whole lot of things. One of the things it does is pull sugar out of the blood and puts it into cells. Over time, when the cells don't listen to insulin, more and more insulin has to come out. The body becomes resistant to insulin. Pretty soon, blood sugar doesn't budge because the cells aren't listening to the insulin anymore, all the while that insulin levels are creeping higher and higher and higher. This condition is called means a lot, insulin, emia in the blood, hyperinsulinemia, too much insulin in the blood. So now you got hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, plus hyperinsulinemia. Well, one of the things insulin does is it makes cells divide. It's a rev you up hormone. Remember, this is all about revving things up, things moving too fast. So the insulin makes cells divide really fast. One of the types of cells that divide really fast in response to insulin are the cells inside the blood vessels. So now you've got inflammatory factors in the blood vessels, and you've got a thickening of the blood vessel walls, further compromising blood flow, further compromising oxygenation of the tissues, including the heart, nourishment of the tissues, including the heart, detoxification, nourishment of tissues, including the heart. So you've got gases and toxins from the intestine coming out into the blood, creating an inflammatory condition in the blood. Point number one on the triangle of disease. When you're not processing nutrients correctly at the level of the intestine, that leads to blood sugar problems. Elevated blood sugar disturbs the lining of the blood vessels. You get inflammation inside the blood vessels. Blood doesn't flow as effectively, and now you've got malnourishment and low levels of oxygen and accumulating toxicity in the heart. To compound that, insulin thickens the blood vessels, and again, blood isn't able to be propelled through. You can see how we're starting into some serious problems here, but they're not at the level of the heart. And there's nothing they can do at the level of the heart except pull things open or burn things or give you drugs, because the problem is only seen here, but it starts here. But it gets worse because now once blood sugar is really high and there's low levels of oxygen, the body goes into an emergency state. The heart's not getting oxygen, the brain's not getting oxygen, they're not getting nutrients, toxicity is building up, there are immune factors going into the blood. The body now starts to freak out and it pumps out its emergency hormone. Its emergency hormone or stress hormone is called cortisol. And one of the effects of cortisol is to raise the blood pressure. So you've already got high blood pressure, hypertension, because you've got inflammation, the blood can't get through effectively. You've got increase in the thickness of the blood vessels, secondary to insulin. You've got toxicity in the blood. So all of this compromises the heart and the brain and the tissue's ability to get oxygen. The body feels like there's an emergency. It sends out cortisol. One of cortisol's job is to make the heart work harder and to raise the blood pressure, which of course creates even more problems because now the heart is more dependent on oxygen, more dependent on nutrients, and accumulating more toxicity. Once the cortisol levels remain elevated, following the blood sugar problems and the insulin problems, following the digestive problems, eventually the thyroid will slow down. The thyroid controls everything. When the thyroid slows down, everything slows down, including blood movement, which leads to more suffocation, toxification, and starvation. Those are the three elements: starvation, suffocation, toxification, malnourishment, lack of oxygen, and toxification. It's really, that's what you can break this whole thing down to. Starvation, suffocation, toxification, leading to inflammation, leading to more starvation, suffocation, toxification, leading to more inflammation, all from the triangle of disease. That's all you got to really know. Now, I'm giving you all of these fancy mechanisms because I want you to understand how your heart works, so that when the doctor tells you something, you'll have a good answer for him. Or when somebody tells you about a nutritional supplement, you'll be able to ask a good question about the nutritional supplementation. So all of these things, the inflammation at the level of the blood, the hypertension at the level of the blood, the accumulation of toxicity at the level of the blood, and the heart, and the low levels of oxygen and low levels of nourishment, all compound to create difficulties for the heart to do its pumping action and its electrical conductivity action. When that happens, several things can occur. Number one, the heart can jiggle. The electrical energy that goes through the heart is very, very tightly controlled. It's a very precise electromagnetic wave that has to flow just so. But once this system becomes robbed of oxygen and nutrients and toxic, following that whole schematic that I just talked about, the electrical energy does not flow effectively. When the electrical energy doesn't flow effectively, the heartbeat doesn't occur correctly, and the heart jiggles. That's called fibrillation. And it is an epidemic. I guarantee you I can see maybe 30 people in this room. I guarantee 1 or 2 people have atrial fibrillation. I've been told they have atrial fibrillation. Am I right?
Yep.
Okay? It's because it happens all the time. You can see why now, though, from the digestive system and the blood sugar system and the cortisol thyroid system and back to the digestive system, because the thyroid, by the way, regulates the digestive system. So once you have this triad of bodily breakdown, it goes in a circle where the thyroid causes the digestive system to become more suppressed, which causes the blood sugar system to become more dysfunctional, which causes the adrenal thyroid axis to become involved, which slows down the digestion, and it keeps going on and on and on. All of this is really important if you want to cut the head off the snake, and I'll show you how to do that here in a second. So once the electrical energy doesn't flow through the heart effectively, you get fibrillations. If the heart, it feels like there's a tremendous emergency going on, and usually that occurs from a lack of oxygen, which is the most deadly thing that can happen to the body from an evolutionary standpoint, is a lack of oxygen, aside from getting eaten by a tiger. When the lack of oxygen is chronic, the heart will start to get will beat very, very fast. It's a sign that the heart is freaked out. That's called tachy. Tachy means fast. Tachy, like a tachometer in your car, measures speed. Tachy means fast. Cardia means the heart. Tachycardia. And you all heard the term ventricular tachycardia. Ventricular tachycardia is the heart is totally freaked out and starts beating really, really, really fast. Secondary to this whole thing that we just talked about, the toxicity, the low levels of oxygen, and the malnourishment. Another thing that can happen to the heart is that the fluids won't move through, the blood fluids won't move through the heart effectively. That creates a congestive condition. That congestive condition can make the heart eventually weakened or ultimately fail. That's called congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure is when the heart is not able to beat appropriately because of lack of oxygen, lack of nutrition, accumulation of toxicity, and the fluids start to congest. They start to accumulate. Another thing that can happen is as the hypertension, the high blood pressure kicks in because of the cortisol, because of the inflammation, because of the thickened walls of the blood vessels, eventually the heart will have to pump really, really hard, and the heart's a muscle, so it will start to get bigger and stronger. That's called cardiac hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is hyper, a lot of, excess, trophy means growth. Cardiac hypertrophy, the heart will get thickened. The walls of the heart will get thickened. It'll be harder to feed them and to oxygenate them and to detoxify them. And the situation is already caused by problems detoxifying and problems with oxygen and problems with nourishment. And now it becomes even worse. Another thing that can happen is over the course of time, we have this condition, which I call dirty blood. And I say dirty blood because it's so graphic, it really explains what it is, but it's literally toxicity that gets into the blood. These toxins that get into the blood in combination with the damage to the vessel walls, which cause inflammation, in combination with the elevated blood vessels, the elevated thickening of the blood vessels, all of these combine to cause hypertension, high blood pressure. And high blood pressure is associated with all of these issues, and high blood pressure will rob the body, the heart as well as other tissues of all the major nutrients and oxygen and detoxification. When this happens over the course of time and the blood vessels become really thick and toxicity accumulates, the doctor will say, your arteries are clogged. Or they'll say, you have hardened arteries because all these inflammatory factors and the damage, the blood vessels hardens the arteries, hardens the vessels. The vessels are supposed to be flexible. They're supposed to be able to move in and out. Over time, as the tissue becomes damaged and minerals get deposited, like calcium, to repair the damage, and blood fats start to accumulate and toxicity starts to accumulate, you'll have a condition called atherosclerosis or clogged arteries, and they'll have to do a bypass surgery where they bypass the clog or they bypass the blood vessel. By the way, the body will do its own bypasses. Body will grow blood vessels as satellites, as ancillary vessels when certain vessels are clogged. Nonetheless, you may have a severe condition where they'll say, oh, you're 80% blocked, you're 90% blocked. We have to do a bypass surgery where they bypass the blood vessels that are clogged so your heart can get oxygen. If you have clogged arteries or atherosclerosis, your heart doesn't get enough oxygen as well as nourishment or toxins aren't able to be removed, you feel lousy. You feel tired. You can't do anything. You get shortness of breath. Your blood doesn't have enough oxygen in it. And by the way, if there's lung issues, that can also cause a problem with hypertension. That's called pulmonary hypertension, where the blood can't escape the heart and get into the blood vessels. Also, if you have liver issues, the liver is a main regulator, how much blood is going to the heart. And when your liver is toxic, or your liver is inflamed, or your liver is fibrotic or cirrhotic, blood flow is not going to make it through the liver as effectively. Also, when there's toxicity in the liver and toxicity in the blood, the liver will actually shut down, will actually close up, and that will further impede the movement of blood through the heart. So the liver and the lungs also play a major role here, in addition to the intestine. The liver, of course, is the key to understanding. That's like the jumping off point for the triangle of disease. The digestive system, the blood sugar system, and the adrenal thyroid system all meet at the level of the liver. So in any case, there are other, or you can see, we're not even talking about the heart here, except by talking about the end result. The cause is not at the level of the heart, people. The cause is not at the level of the heart. And while cardiologists will save your life and heart doctors will save your life, they cannot have you thrive. You will not be able to thrive unless you address the 3 points where the heart disease is caused from. So how do you do it? Well, it's not that complicated. And the only thing that really gets in the way is our belief system, our willingness. It's the only thing that gets in the way. We have been, and we got to all own up to this, we've been programmed. We're conditioned. We've been infected. We've been, let me get my camera here, see on top of my head. I just noticed that. We've been inoculated and infected with a mind virus called a mind virus is known as a meme. A meme, we've talked about this before, is a mind virus. And we have certain belief systems that have been inoculated into us, that have been infected into us, that have been programmed and conditioned into us that don't serve us. You say, well, not just you saying that, Ben. That's an assertion. No, I do not want to ever be accused of talking in assertions. I only want to talk in logic and science. Mostly just logic, not even science. Mostly logic. We have more doctors per capita than any other culture in the history of mankind. So nobody's sick anymore, right? Our diseases have gone away because we have so many doctors. We have more cardiologists than any other culture ever in history. So we have no more heart disease, right? All the heart disease is gone. Look, obviously I'm being silly here. Clearly, our medical model doesn't work for prevention of disease. It can repair you, and God love the cardiologist who repairs you if you have a heart attack. You know, they can fix you if you have a broken bone or you have some kind of emergency, and praise God for that. Emergency medicine is amazing. And we love our emergency medical professionals, but for things like heart disease that are based in lifestyle, there's nothing they can do. Nothing. And nobody feels better when they're on a beta blocker. And believe me, I've been dispensing beta blockers for 40 years. And nobody feels better when they're on a beta blocker. Just a quick, funny story here. I am so old and I've been practicing pharmacy so long that I remember when beta blockers started. I actually remember when there weren't any beta blockers. Do you know what I mean when I say beta blocker, you guys? Metoprolol is what we call it here. That's the most famous one. Do you have that there, metoprolol? No?
I think.
Bronie, do you have, I'm talking about beta blockers here, and I didn't even think that maybe you don't know what a beta blocker is or use a different term for it. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Beta blockers are a well-known class of
Some of them
drugs.
said no.
Beta blockers are a well-known class of drugs that shut down the nervous system of the heart, the nerves that go into the heart. There's a class of nerves called beta nerves, and beta blockers, as the name implies, block the electricity that flows through the beta system, and that thereby calms the heart down. Again, heart disease is a rev you up, an amped up biochemical challenge. So calming the body down or calming the heart down is one of the medical strategies. Beta blockers block the electrical energy that go into the beta system, and they are the drug treatment of choice for heart disease and also for hypertension. It calms everything down. So a funny story, when I was in pharmacy school, there was a movie. We got all kinds of propaganda in pharmacy school. We had to go to we had to watch movies, we had to watch these special videos, and we had to go to drug company factories to get medically implanted with how wonderful drugs are. Anyway, they watched this movie. This movie was about an hour long, And it was about this new drug that was going to revolutionize heart disease. Before beta blockers, they really couldn't do much for the heart except give you serious antidepressant or serious downers, they call them. So anyway, this drug came out, and the movie was an hour long, and they wanted to popularize how wonderful, how revolutionary this new beta blocker drug was, this new class of cardiovascular drugs were. And the movie was an hour. It was 15 minutes of how great the drug was and 45 minutes of a lady reading the side effects. No lie. 45 minutes she read side effects. Can you imagine? You ever seen those side effects, the list of side effects? She was reading them fast and took her 45 minutes to go through them. And that's when I really dawned on me what I was doing, you know, that there was a problem with my chosen profession. But anyway, that was about the beta blocker class of drugs, which are the drugs of choice for heart disease. The most famous one these days is called metoprolol. Have you heard of that? Metoprolol.
Well,
And metoprolol is... Has other people heard of that? I don't know what you call it over there, but you guys have different names. But metoprolol...
A lot of them
haven't heard of that. Metoprolol is well known for making you feel like doo-doo, making you feel lousy on all levels. Obviously, it's shutting down your heart. So anyway, the first thing you do always is work on digestive health. If you're not working on digestive health and you're going to the doctor for heart disease, you're going to the cardiologist for heart disease, the dermatologist for skin disease, the OBGYN for endometriosis, or the oncologist for cancer, wherever you're going, and you're not addressing digestive health, there's one of two things that's true. Either you don't know about it or you don't care about it. Because if you have a health challenge and you don't address the digestive system first, you can't get rid of the health challenge. I don't care what it is. If you have a disease that is defined as chronic, which means it continues, and degenerative, which means it gets worse, chronic degenerative disease, there is a 100% guarantee, not 99, not 99.9, not 99.99, 100% guarantee you're dealing with what's called dysbiosis, messed up gut bacteria, dysbiosis, leading to damage at the level of the intestine. Everybody who has Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, vitiligo, dementia, cancer, and yes, heart disease or cardiovascular disease is dealing with this issue. Everybody. And so either you don't know about it, but now you all know about it, or you don't care about it. And if you don't, you don't. That's fine. You know, everybody gets to do whatever they want to do. But the fact is this is our point of power. It's no accident that it's in the center of the body. Hippocrates said it in the year 600 or 500 or 400 BC. All disease begins in the gut. And this is not, again, an assertion. It's logic. Why? Well, the digestive system is where the outside world meets the inside world. And not even the digestive system. Right where the intestine hits the blood. Food goes in your digestive system, it goes into the intestine. And obviously this is the Cliff Notes, the process we've talked about a lot. It's super fascinating. The food goes into the intestine and it crosses into the blood. Right at that juncture where the intestine, where the food goes, crosses the intestine into the blood. Right at that juncture is where the disease process begins. But it's worse than that. You see, over time, the intestine becomes inflamed and spreads out. When something's inflamed, it expands. And that means all kinds of stuff can get into the blood, including literally particles of bacteria, food particles, immune particles. The blood is a very, very, very complex organ, system, tissue. It's not just red water. It's not dyed water. It is incredibly complex. It has to be just so. It has to have just the right amount of oxygen, just the right pH, just the right amount of fluid, just the right amount of fats, just the right amount of glucose, just the right. It is so precisely balanced and organized. And it can absorb and it has mechanisms for dealing with ups and downs, and that's a good thing. But over the course of time, all kinds of stuff gets into the blood. This is where we get off to the disease races. Then on top of everything else, because nutrition is processed at that point. Not only is toxicity getting into the blood, but we're not absorbing our nutrients. So you have this 1-2 punch. Punch number one, boom, toxicity. Punch number two, boom, malnourishment. You can see why this is so important, this area right here. And to compound the problem, in the last 120 years or so, what are we, 20, say 140 years, 150, 130 years, we have completely changed our food supply. If all of evolution was a clock, and the very first form of life was started at 1 minute after 12, and we are now at, we're moving around, the clock is now moving around, we changed the food supply at 10 seconds before midnight in terms of our evolutionary clock. So our bodies have not had a chance to adjust to any of those things. And because our need and our body's desire and craving and need for energy is insatiable, because for millions of years, the human body didn't have energy. There was no food. Starvation was a real thing. We don't have starvation anymore, you know, for most of the world, but it was a real thing. So our bodies were designed, and we're the evolutionary byproducts of ancestors who survived by not being able to resist energy. Energy is called calories in terms of food. And the most high energy or high calorie forms of food are fat and sugar, which is why we can't get enough fat and sugar. But on top of that, because profit interests and corporate money doesn't care about our lives, it cares about getting more people to eat, it has created a food supply that is like a nuclear bomb of fat and sugar wherever we go. And the combination of not being able to resist it and the combination of having it readily available has created a perfect storm of over-energizing the body. And for most of us, we're trying to get energy like we're drinking water out of a fire hose from a cellular perspective. That's the kind of energy we're getting. And that's not what the body wants. Remember, the body wants calm. The body, all our diseases are revved up, are rev you up conditions. So first thing, work on the gut. Dysbiosis, patch up the leaky gut. I-26. Everybody with heart disease should be on I-26. It's not part of the Healthy Brain and Heart Pack. Everybody with heart disease should be on the Nightly Essence. Nightly Essence has bacteria that can reestablish or rebalance the microbiome in the intestine, but it also has an enzyme that roto-rooters the blood. And enzymes can be very helpful for people who have heart disease. We'll talk about another one here in a second. This enzyme, which is called nattokinase, which you'll find in the Nightly Essence. You have Nightly Essence down there, right?
We do.
Nightly Essence. It not only rebalances the bacteria in the gut, it also roto-rooters the blood vessels. Remember, atherosclerosis and toxicity in the blood and inflammation in the blood are causing this condition. Are you trying to tell me something? 2 minutes?
Yes.
2 minutes, Jen. 2 minutes.
Sean is telling me 2 minutes.
Dawn is telling you 2 minutes. I can't do this in 2 minutes, but I'll do what I can do. Okay. The second element, the second point on the triangle disease, the blood sugar system, and all heart problems should be treated like diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
So the Healthy Blood Sugar Pack. I know it's not in the Healthy Brain and Heart Pack. Mix the two together. Throw in the niacin and throw in the ultimate niacin too, because that's important not only for the heart, but also for the sugar. And nutrients that are important for blood sugar are also important for the heart. Nutrients that are important for blood sugar are also important for the heart. For example, the sweeties, chromium, vanadium. These are important for cardiovascular health, just like they're important for blood sugar health. And then throw in the ultimate selenium, which is also important for the blood sugar system and also important for the heart. And then I would also be doing, of course, that goes without saying, the Healthy Brain Heart Pack. Essential fats and fatty vitamins are very, very important for the heart. And that's where the Ultimate EFAs come in and the Ultimate EFA Plus. And I'm very happy that the Healthy Brain Heart Pack has both the Ultimate EFA and the Ultimate EFA Plus. And then I didn't tell you about a food diary, but you should probably do food diary. And listen, how many of these have we done, Bronie, over the last 3 years or 2 years? Well, how many of these talks have you done? 150, 60? I don't know how many. Every single one, I say the same thing. So if you want more, go back and listen to what me and Bronie talked about here, for the last couple of years. If you want more, or if you want clarification on what we talked about, go back and do review. It's very simple. The disease we got to worry about, the most important disease we got to worry about is overthinkitis, as well as mimetic infection. Don't overthink. Work on digestive health, stabilize your blood sugar, and I forgot one of the most important parts is calm the body down. The best way to calm the body down, the fastest way, there's a lot of ways to do it. The fastest way, slow, deep, rhythmic breathing. Slow, deep, rhythmic breathing, and we should all be practicing it every day. I do it twice a day myself. And then also go on, 2 very important places where you can get information are from Heart Math. I don't know if you ever heard of Heart Math, HEARTMATH, Heart Math. They've got all kinds of information. They talk about something called heart rate variability and heart rate coherence, which Dr. Laura Dennison has talked about. And by the way, Dr. Dennison has some really good cardiovascular health products too, including Hope, which cleans the blood. And then there's one more thing I was going to say, which I forgot. Oh, oxygenation. So sleep apnea can also be a big problem for cardiovascular system. Sleep apnea is associated with blood sugar problems as well as obesity. And body weight is also a problem because the more body weight you're carrying, the harder it is for the heart to pump all that blood through all the vessels, the higher risk of hypertension as well as cardiovascular disease. If you have sleep apnea, get yourself a CPAP or some kind of device for improving your ability to breathe. If you wake up in the morning and you feel really, really tired, and if you had a good night's sleep and you suffer from atrial fibrillation or ventricular tachycardia, you almost certainly have sleep apnea, and that can have a very horrible long-term effect on the cardiovascular system through heart problems. There's so much more to talk about, but you guys got the gist of it, and thank you so much, Bronie and Sean and all my friends at Longevity. And by the way, you got a guy now.
Thank you very much.
Let me give one more props. Let me give props to one more person. That's Dr. Kevin Grundy, as he says, who is a brilliant naturopath and healthcare professional, and you're very lucky to have him in New Zealand and Australia. Hi, Kevin. I've known him for 8 or 10 years, a long time I've known Kevin from. You're doing great work. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to my friends in Australia.
I do my best to share your message, and Dr. Wallach, I think you do a great job, and you're inspire to us all. And yes, I will get you here soon.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, as I ask everyone here in Bronie's world to stay safe, stay informed, be empowered, but do not live in fear, my friends. And when you're taking care of the gut, you're taking care of the heart, and then you too will be powerful, beautiful, brilliant, and most definitely very brave. God bless you all. And catch you again tomorrow here in Bronie's world. And thank you, Ben, for everything, and Kevin Grundy in New Zealand. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thanks, Bronwyn.